Okay guys, we are going to go ahead and finish up our practice painting prep by, if you want to outline it, you can. You can see here, I have a few pieces that I'm going to also, I've outlined everything, but you don't have to re-outline with the Sharpie. I am, just because it's the look I'm going for. Now generally, in a painting, we don't do this. I'm allowing it on this one because, again, this is practice, and I want you to be able to see your lines a little bit better whenever we are painting. But traditionally, we don't want to outline our stuff with a Sharpie. We want to be able to do our shading and get it to blend, but this is just practice, and I want you to be able to see your lines well. You can just leave it as a pencil outline if you want, but this is an option. Now, if you do this option, whether it be a Sharpie outline or ink pen outline, just make sure your ink is dry. But then before you start painting, what I always like to do, if I cover up pencil lines with something else, I go back and after I finish tracing it all, I'll go back and erase any graphite. And I think because you can still see like the parts where maybe you just didn't quite hit the line and it's poking out here and there. If you're using ink pen, really make sure your ink is dry before you do this because it will smear. So I just think it gives it a cleaner look if you do that. So I erased most of it earlier. I was just going to kind of finish showing you what I like to do. So, okay, so my picture is ready to start painting. Now there's, again, certain techniques I want you to practice on this. For the most part on this big flower is going to be graded wash. We're going to do any part of the petal that's closer to the middle you're going to do darker, and it's going to fade to light at the end of each petal. Okay, each petal needs it. Don't just kind of do overall. You really have to paint individual petals. Now this part of the petal, I would not paint. I would leave that blank for now, and I'll let you go back in with a watercolor pencil to do those. Same thing for these pieces in here, the center pieces of each flower we'll do with a watercolor pencil because that's the tiny detail. So again, this is going to be mostly graded wash on each petal. These we will probably do flat wash, but we'll do different tones in each petal. Similar color, but like this will probably have a lighter tone here. This one would have a darker tone here because it's being overlapped, just to kind of practice your flat washes. And then we'll probably do graded wash on the most part, but we're also going to paint the background. And on the background, we might do a salt and wet on wet technique. Speaking of which, I'm going to go grab my salt real fast. I forgot to get that. Okay, so I got my salt. I'm actually going to start with the background, and I'm going to just do, for the sake of this tutorial, I'm not going to paint the whole thing right here in front of you, but I'm going to show you maybe the order you should go in, and showing you how to get started on each technique. So off of the screen I have my paints. I have a few different sizes of brushes. Again, I like to do square brushes, but I also have like some small ones and medium-sized ones. I don't have really big ones because we've got a lot of smaller detail in this. So I just kind of grabbed a variety of sizes. I don't think I have enough paintbrushes for y'all to grab this many. So grab like a small, a medium, and maybe like one that has, a really small tip for the edges. So I'm going to start with the background first, because I'm going to do a light tone, a really light, subtle blue. And being that that's going to be a lighter color than the rest of my image, if I make any mistakes and overlap into the flower itself, it'll be a little bit easier to be covered up. If I smudge this out here first before I paint it, then there's a good chance that I won't be able to hide it as much. So we'll still have to be careful when we go back in and paint here, but that's why I'm going to do the background first. So we're going to do a wet on wet technique with a watered down blue. So you might go ahead and in your tray, get you some water in your blue and grab grab it and put it in the lid, get it kind of watered down. I'll kind of show you what I've worked up as soon as I get it mixed. Okay, so I'm going to start like probably with kind of a watered down blue like this. Those of you using the tube, make sure yours looks like this too before you apply it. We can always darken, we can't lighten. So I've kind of washed the blue off of my brush just in my cup because that won't be, it's pretty fresh water. So again, with wet on wet, we're going to apply the water first. And you don't want to try to wet down the whole paper in the background right now, because by the time you wet, if you wet this and try to continue to wet the rest, by the time you get back here and then ready to add the color, it's going to be absorbed in there. So the wet on wet won't work as well. So I've got that section wet. I'm going to come and grab my blue. And again, I'm just kind of doing a washy sort of look. So I'm not doing so much the starbursty effect on this one, but I'm going to kind of brush in my color, and I'm going to let it be uneven looking. I don't really want this, for me personally, I don't want it to be super smooth. So I've got that section that I've painted with water first, and then I added my color. And then again, while it's still wet, I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of salt on it. It won't be super noticeable, the salt, because I'm doing a lighter color. You could go maybe a bit darker than me, but again, I want mine to be really soft, so I'm not going to go super dark. I'm going to do another section. Again, I just have water right now. And I'm getting it in there. And the one thing I do like about the wet on wet is when you do apply your paint to it, it does really good not to go where you haven't already put the water. Okay. So I'll go ahead and put it kind of right in there. Okay, so I've got water all in there. Again, I'm going to come over here and grab my blue, make sure it's watered down off in here first, and I'm just going to kind of, I want it to be a little swirly. So I'm not really doing a wash. I'm just kind of bringing it around. Okay. And again, while it's still wet, sprinkle in a little bit of salt. So that's all as far as the background goes that I'm going to demonstrate for you on the video, but I would continue that before you get into your flowers. So since this area is wet, you'd also would want to make sure before you start painting your flowers that the background is dry. That way you don't accidentally let some of your wet paint grab into your background by accident. So if that paint's dry there, it's less likely to have that happen. All right. So I'm going to move over into my big flower, and I'm going to, you can pick whatever colors you want on your flowers. I would just make sure they're colors that would look good together. I think I'm going to do I don't know, in my brain I kind of want like a purpley tone on this flower, but I know, I change my mind. I want a red. I want a red, but I might do like purpley kind of shadows. Sort of like in Impressionism, instead of using black to shade, I'll just use like a darker tone, and red helps make purple, so they would blend well together. So on these petals, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Again, each one needs to have its own dark value and fade to light. Okay, so keep in mind, like, where do things overlap? So this petal's overlapping this petal, so I'm going to have a shadow there. This one's overlapping this one too, so I'm going to kind of have a darker shadow there. If you remember when we were talking about shading, those proximity shadows, which is the darkest point on an image, that's where you would want your darkest value. Okay, so now I've just grabbed some water. I kind of brushed off the extra paint, and I'm just going to try to grab with water, because again, I can always darken, but I can't lighten. So I'm not going to rush this. I'm going to take my time. I'm going to pay attention to my edges. And I'm going to make sure it's fading. Okay. So I've got a pretty good graded wash right there. So again, we're going to use watercolor pencils in the trim, so don't paint into the trim. Now, I do think I'm going to go add a little bit of a purplish shadow. You don't have to do the same colors I'm doing, but I think that would just kind of give it a little bit more of a interesting look. You could also have your red fade to yellow or fade to orange or something like that. Layering is really the trick to good art. When you keep everything so flat and monotone, and there's some styles of arts that is that, but if you want kind of a more in-depth kind of look, you're going to want to kind of layer colors a couple of times or layer shading to make it more rich. Okay, I'm swapping brushes just to kind of help me get that to fade down a little bit more. Okay, so again, I'm getting this kind of rougher texture that I'm not a huge fan of. So remember, you can fix stuff like that if you want more of a smooth look, which is what we're practicing right now. Get more water and you can kind of smooth it over. Maybe go side to side instead of brushing like that. But if you do brush, actually that's something we should probably talk about. It would actually be pretty beneficial for you to apply your strokes in the direction that the object is flowing. Because any strokes that do appear, they would just look more like texture. So if they flow with the shape, it's just going to look a little bit better. All right, so that's my graded wash on that one petal. And again, every petal, you don't have to do two tones. You could just do, like I could have just done the dark red and fade to the light red. That's what I'm looking for, is that value change. So again, each individual petal, just take care with that. So that, again, that whole thing here, I might go back and do an inner one. Those are kind of the ones that lay out. So in the meantime, though, I'm going to come over here and do a flat wash on this flower. Okay, so again, we are going to want just one tone, but just different values of it. So I'm going to start with, what color do I want to make that one? I kind of want to make that one, I kind of want to make it a red too, but I might actually make it more of a pink. So you can make pink just by watering down your red, but since your sets do have white in it, make sure your brush is clean when you do get into that white color. But you could grab some white and mix it in. I'm going to mix in some white so I just get more of a pastel-y pink. But water down red in watercolor really makes a pink tone too. But again, make sure your brush is clean when you grab your white paint. Okay, so I've got my pink tone, and I don't want to start with that big brush. Sorry, I'm adjusting my color a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so remember, flat wash, our goal is to keep it all one solid color. So when I start to run out of the color on my brush, then I need to go back and grab more. Okay, so I'm going to probably grab more now. Okay, that actually turned out pretty well. That's one pretty solid tone. So on this, I'm going to use that same tone of paint for this petal here. Okay, and then I want to show you, this is kind of a little bit rougher. So remember, long overlapping strokes will help blend those flat washes a little bit instead of the short strokes. need to change the direction so I can brush this a little bit better. So I had to get just some more water to help smooth that out. Okay. So I got I got those 2 tones of flat washes. Now I would, on, again, where this one's being overlapped by 2 petals, this would be a darker value. So using the same tone of color, just make it a little bit darker. So I'm gonna, in the same spot where I had my pink, I'm gonna go and just add more red to make it a darker tone. But I'm still going to do a flat wash. Now, I'll just let you know while I'm thinking about it. Usually, I will have us do a watercolor painting. That is your choice. I honestly don't know if this year we will have time to do one. So I think we're going to spend a little bit more time making this practice painting look really good, and then depending on when we get done, because I still want us to do paper mache this year, and if we take too long in watercolor, we will run out of time for that. So we might just skip that, practice our techniques really good on this, and move into paper mache. So I do want you to not rush through this, because this might be the only grade you get in this unit, and it will probably just affect your overall average a little bit more. So anyways, with that same tone that I used here, I'm going to just go ahead and do another flat wash over here with it, because this one is also kind of set behind those a little bit more. This one I'll probably paint a little bit lighter. Ideally, I would do a graded wash on this, but since we're trying to practice our techniques, this flower is probably the best option to practice our flat washes on. Okay, so now on these little pieces that kind of flip up, we're going to do an even lighter value than we did in our light tone. So I'm going to go back and make a lighter version of that color in my palette. So this one's going to be a really light pink. Okay, and again, you could do whatever color you want. And I might still go back and add some more light to that. That's not as much of a difference in value as I would like it to be, but there is a different tone there. You guys can't really see it on the camera though. I can see it. So I'm going to grab just a little bit more white on my brush instead of mixing it, and I'm just going to take that white and apply it just to lighten that color up. Okay, so again, we're going to do these flowers here are going to be flat wash practice. This big flower is going to be graded wash practice. The background's going to be wet on wet and salt practice. I'm not really seeing any effects on my salt right now. I think my color is just so light, it's just not really picking it up. But that's okay. You might have a little bit different tone than me, and it might show up a little bit better for you. So the remaining flowers, like this one, I would suggest graded wash on. I would also, for me, graded wash, I feel like, is the one that just needs the most practice. But the remainder, the leaves and the flower buds and the rose, I'll let you choose what technique you want to use on those, as long as we have wet on wet in the background, flat wash on these two, and graded wash on this one. And then, of course, we'll use the watercolor pencil on the little tiny center pieces. So now that you know that, let's work on that. Take your time, make it look nice.